Hey guys, welcome to Pancreas Pals. Emily here.
And Miriam.
And this week we're keeping it simple. We decided that this was an episode that's going to be titled Back to Basics. We all have to get back to our roots at some point. But first, I want to say thanks to everyone for listening to this episode. We have been beyond MIA. That seems to be the vibe of 2021.
Yes.
Miriam and I's personal lives are just hella busy. And by personal life, I mean my work life and my personal life. I actually recently just moved in with my boyfriend. Shout out to Matt. He's great. But so things have been a whirlwind, but the pals are here. We're sticking around. We're getting content out when we can. And thanks for bearing with us. But back to basics. Miriam and I were like, what does that even mean? So for anyone that's like, what? You know, it means everything and nothing at the same time. But we mean this in terms of how we approach our diabetes. Sometimes, I don't know about you guys, but I am so guilty of being super dependent on my technology. And I'm so into my looping. I'm so into my Dexcom. I'm so into this and that. And yes, I know how privileged that is. I'm super grateful and, you know, live in that privileged life with technology. Yeah. But it's, I've realized like sometimes I really cannot feel my lows anymore. Or, you know, I rage bolus, and if I didn't have my Dexcom or if I wasn't constantly checking my blood sugar, like I wouldn't be rage bolusing, right? Because I'd be using the allotted time from like my early days when I was first diagnosed, what they originally told me to do, which is like, wait, I think it's 3 hours after administering insulin. Now I can't even remember my basic training. Miriam's been doing this a lot longer than I have. She has been diabetic for 27 years now.
25 still, 26 in March.
I keep, crazy. Every month I add another year. So.
It feels like it sometimes. No, but so we were thinking, you know, sometimes you have to go back to basics about the stuff you learned upon diagnosis. The stuff I learned upon diagnosis is no longer relevant, that's for sure.
They like just came out with Dexcoms like when she was like 10. So it's been a minute.
If that. So basics is relative, but I think, you know, I was thinking when life gets busier, and I think for a lot of people, especially around the holidays, it's either busy with work or school or whatever it is as you're finishing up and dealing with all these deadlines before the holidays. And the holidays in general can be super stressful, so I think we get more distracted. And so I find that diabetes-wise, it's like I'm in, what's the phrase I'm looking for? Where you're just sort of like in this like robotic autopilot. Thank you. You knew what I was trying to say. You're sort of in autopilot where you're taking it day by day, hour by hour, not really identifying patterns. It's a kind of like survival mode in a sense. And I find sometimes there's like, if you take a step back, you know, back to basics, look at your data, look at your like clarity report for the last couple days, there's usually a pattern, you know, not always. Things get wonky for sure, but sometimes you can identify a pattern. But it takes you sort of taking a step back, taking a breath, and looking. And that's like one of the most simple back to basics things that I often forget. And I have to like consciously remind myself, like, why don't I look at those clarity reports that are they're just created for me without having me to request them. You know, it's like such a nice tool.
For those wondering what a clarity report is,
sorry.
No, you're good. It's Dexcom's version of like compiling data and showing you. It's basically Dexcom graphs, but for up to 90-day period pattern callouts. For those of you that don't have a Dexcom or don't have a Libre or a continuous glucose monitor at all, you can definitely try and track some things through your glucometer, your blood sugar tests.
For sure. And there's so many apps as well that you can use that will track all of these things for you.
Android apps, not just iPhone too. So it's the stuff, it is more labor involved if you don't have, you know, a continuous glucose monitor, but it is doable. I'm not suggesting people do this for like a year. I'm saying like a day, like 2 days a week or, you know, just to try and figure out if you're going through ups and downs and trying to nail down what's going on in some patterns. Sure. But I think
Yeah, looking at numbers. This reminds me of like in the olden days before all this technology, we just had to like fill out those little
the sheets,
like handwritten sheets, right?
I think they just give those to people when they're first diagnosed too, because I had the sheets and like in 2014 they definitely had Dexcom, so I think it was like G4, but it was around.
Yes,
this kind of brings up, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Miriam, but I think the reason why we landed on this topic is because a few weeks ago I didn't need insulin. Like, I think I was using 10 units less a day for like 3 days. And I was so confused. I was like, I'm not on my period. For all the men out there, or sorry, for anyone who doesn't experience periods, you have no, and you don't know what I'm talking about, just say a blessing, because it is buy a hat, hold the F onto it, a crazy roller coaster with hormones and insulin resistance and just crazy things.
I just need to pause because Emily is always, I don't know if you create these phrases or you just introduce them to me because like I'm old and you're
not old. You're like 4 years old.
I don't know if you're like Gen X or something, but every time you introduce one of these new phrases, I love it.
Okay, I did steal buy a hat and hold F onto it from SNL. If you're ever questioning a phrase, it's likely from SNL or the South. But Miriam's from Atlanta, which is not far from Jacksonville, Florida, where I'm from. So likely we have the same sayings. Moving on, but thank you for appreciating a good lull.
Of course.
I kid you not. I think I never have, like, my low percentage is usually like 1% because I have like a higher range. I try to stay between like 100 and 120 or whatever on loop. And so, I mean, sometimes it's 90 to 110, or 90 to 100, but it really depends. So like I saw I was going low, so I was trying to skew myself a little bit higher. And I ate so many carbs. I gave myself a fraction of the insulin. I had no idea what was going on, and this was happening for days, like 3 days. So I'm texting Miriam, as I always do, because, you know, everyone needs a diabetic sounding board, because this disease is literally trial process of elimination, or what, I can't think of the words. But Miriam and I are going through all this stuff. She's like, oh, are you on your period? I'm like, no, LOL. Help me, hold me. Like, oh, have you been more active lately? Absolutely not. No, I've just been sitting. Have you changed your diet? Nope. Eat the same stuff. Goes through the list and she goes, oh, is this like a new site for you? Like a new location on your body? Or maybe you just have a really absorbent location. I was like, it's not new in that, like, I use my arms all the time and I had it on my arm, but it was in a spot tucked away that I don't usually use because your girl is running out of real estate. But that's exactly what it was. And so it was time to change my pump anyways, right? Because, 3 days, usually on the third or fourth day, I'll change it based on how much insulin is left and how itchy it is. But I changed it and immediately shot back up to my normal resistance. I told her
she found this like secret, magical, super absorbent site that may never be repeated.
I know Miriam always finds a silver lining. I text her complaining and she's like, oh, but this is so great. Like, try it on Thanksgiving next year. Or like, oh, this is so great. Like, now you know that you've tried this and it doesn't work. That's one less thing to worry about on your plate. And I'm like, I love you, because the irony of this is, sorry to Matt if you're listening to this, he's in the next room, I don't consider myself a super positive person. I wouldn't say I'm negative all the time, but I'm definitely not like Miriam shining a bright light on things.
Oh my gosh,
but Matt is, I wouldn't say he's a negative person, but he is like much more cynical than I am. So like and he's always telling me how I'm such a positive person. It's just really funny realizing the trickle down, like it's way all relative. We all look at these different situations. Matt's incredibly supportive. I love you, Matt. You rock, don't ever change. But anyways, this whole scenario that lasted 3 days where I literally did not get a full night's sleep. I had to keep eating, and I was like, I feel like I gained 5 pounds, which again, doesn't matter in the scheme of things, not the end of the world. But anyone who knows what I'm talking about, when you have to feed your insulin, as I had a doctor explain it to me once, that is not a fun feeling, especially because you're always full. Like, I'm always I feel like I slosh. I'm just full of juice. That's disgusting. I should have given a warning, everyone. But that kind of spurred this back to basics. So Miriam walking me through all those questions where she was like, okay, well, did you consider this? Did you consider this? I was like, I know all of this in my mind, but I don't take the time to actually think about it. It's like I subconsciously go through the checklist, but I don't really subconsciously because I'm not acknowledging it. Like that thought about the site placement, I only think about if my blood sugars are high. I never consider it if my blood sugars are going low. So yeah, apparently I just found a really spongy part on my bod. That's how I explain my body type, spongy.
Yeah. When you take it off, you know how sometimes there's like a little bit of blood in the cannula too? I always wonder, like, wow.
Did it go straight into the bloodstream?
Yeah, like and sometimes, like if you're giving injections, I would notice there's sometimes it's like very quickly, and you have to wonder, like, oh, maybe that went like straight shot into the blood. That's why if you end up like on an insulin drip, if you're hospitalized or something, like it works so quickly because it's going like straight into the bloodstream instead of the way that we normally have to give insulin. I never think about that. Yeah, you know, it's interesting, but yeah, I think the theme of this, beyond just back to basics, is like sit back and reflect, because and we're all guilty of not doing that 98% of the time because we have to function, right? We're full-fledged humans and we have lives outside of diabetes, and we need to just like make it through. So like you're on autopilot, you're in survival mode, you're just getting through.
And so that is good, because you're not sitting there hyperventilating, if you're me, and thinking about diabetes every second of every day.
Exactly.
But you do lose perspective.
You lose perspective. And I think it's if you find yourself getting frustrated but not taking the time to figure out, like, okay, is this a one-off like bad day, which also happens. Sometimes there's just off days. Is this a one-off bad day, or is this a pattern? Let me investigate a little bit and see if there's something I can do about it.
For sure. And then just to round out that story, I then proceeded to go high for like a full week after that. So my Dexcom Clarity app is not my friend right now. I'm back up to like, I don't believe in sharing A1Cs. I don't think that that's like a sustainable thing to, you know, no one's one A1C the entirety of their diabetes. It's just not how things are. And
we're about time and range here.
Yes, we are about time and range. But my average glucose is back up to like 140. And for the longest time, and by the longest time, I mean a beautiful year pretty much, it was like 128. And it's, you know, those 12 points are really... that can be anything on the A1C scale. Like it really could be anything, but that kind of transfers if it is accurate, which my Dexcom G6 has not been the first few days of every cycle that I put a new one on. So I'm taking these numbers with a grain of salt. But, you know, it does set me back a little bit emotionally, because I am exhausted trying to keep myself alive, as are the rest of you who've gotten burnt out every now and then. I think I'm actually reaching another burnout phase. I feel like I'm blessed to have never really gotten to a burnout before. I've gotten exhausted and overwhelmed, but like I'm burnt out with COVID. I'm burnt out with like, you know, everything, because it is that time of year. Also, it's the end of a year. It's the beginning of a new year. And I think back to basics can also mean taking a step back and looking at the basic needs that you have and how you've addressed them throughout the year. So for me, I think I did a pretty good job, even though my numbers are higher than I'd like them to be, and they're higher than they have been for the past few years. I'm proud of myself for still maintaining a decent time in range and, you know, doing all these big life things, like moving in with my boyfriend, starting another new job. This is the same job I've had for 7 months, everyone. I don't want you to think that I got another job. You know, just all these crazy things that, I guess crazy is the wrong words, all of these life-changing things that add up. And, you know, I think of my boyfriend, or I think of my sister, or really any other person that doesn't have diabetes, and I'm like, this year has been a lot for them, and they don't have to keep themselves alive every day. I mean, yeah, we all have to keep ourselves alive every day, but like different degree. And I think that we all just deserve to take a minute while you're listening to this, take a deep breath, and I don't mean that in a condescending way. I mean in a celebratory way, and think like you have gotten to this point, and no matter what your mental health history is or has been, or how strong you feel at any given moment in your relationship with diabetes, you know, we're getting there. We're getting through. We're learning more every day. is a step forward, even if it feels like sometimes it's a step back. It is a step forward because you can take that day as a learning experience and a chance to grow. So as you're heading into this back to basics period, or if you're feeling the struggle like I am, just know that you're not alone in feeling that way, and that is okay.
Amen. Yeah, and I think there is a tendency at the end of the year for people to reflect and come up with like New Year's resolutions and sort of this like fresh start, etc. And I think there is a tendency for people to, when they reflect, identify the things they didn't achieve, or that they, more negative perspective, like I didn't do this, or I didn't get this done, or I want to do this better, etc. And I think we're kind of encouraging you to like think of all that you did, all that you accomplished, health-wise or not. You did it all with diabetes, and commend yourself for the positives that came of this year, the things that you're proud of, and the things that you're not, like, push them aside.
You can leave them in 2021.
You can leave them in 2021. We're leaving a lot of shit in 2021.
I'm trying to take less shit into 2022. That's like, there's just, I think moving, I literally moved like 2 weeks ago. I think moving really I've never felt more diabetic than I have moving in New York City, because I realized the amount, and this is a blessed problem, the amount of stockpiled supplies I have. And like, that is physical baggage that I'm bringing into this new apartment with my boyfriend. And he has a lot of stuff, but it's like stuff he loves, and like he's accumulated over the years from his travels, from, like very Marie Kondo of his life. Like, he has just more books than clothes. Like, he's that kind of guy, and that's why I love him. But meanwhile, I have more insulin pumps, more Dexcoms, more test strips, more Lancets than I have anything else. And like, that's, if I always have that Miriam in my head being like, but that's so great. Like, you're stockpiled, if the apocalypse comes, you've got yourself covered. Not that Miriam would ever say that, but I find myself being like, woe is me. Like, I have, I have all this shit. I can't, run away if I want to for the weekend and not bring anything.
It becomes a symbol of
of the disease, the literal physical baggage, let alone the miles more of emotional baggage that comes with the chronic illness.
But I must say, who among us doesn't have a surplus of Lancets?
Like, who changes their Lancet every time they check their blood? Like,
I actually just changed mine for the.
Miriam. No, you get any better of a person? Like,
no,
okay.
I'm telling you, I think I changed it for the. I cannot recall the last time I had changed it prior. I use the Lancet I use is like one of the one-touch ones where it has like
the 6. That's what I use.
It has like 6 little needles in it, which again, you're supposed to like press a button thing to like
shift it over,
which I rarely do.
I always feel like such a big person. Like, I'm like, I am on top of my life right now. I could be like, my blood sugar could be like 400, and I could be like half alive, and I'd be like, I changed my Lancet though.
Yeah,
so like,
I'm on top of the world.
Exactly.
Well, I have like an embarrassing amount of these Lancet like refills. So I changed one because I realized like my finger, it just wasn't pricking very well, and I couldn't figure out why. And I was like, you know what? I could probably go for a Lancet change. I don't know the last time I did that. It could be, I don't want to say a year because that seems pretty dramatic, but it was probably at least 3 months, probably closer to 6 months.
I'm in no position to talk because I am just as bad, if not worse.
I wish I wrote it down. I should start.
We should start documenting it. Yeah. But what was I going to say? Oh, for those of you who don't know, to put this in perspective, and this obviously has nothing to do with Miriam, but has everything to do with Miriam. She has a father who is a doctor and a husband who is a doctor, and lives obviously with her husband and lived obviously with her father at some point, and she doesn't change her Lancet.
Oh my God. No,
for the rest of us, we shouldn't feel bad.
Oh, please.
Just even shaming
my endocrinologist has type 1, and I guarantee he's not changing it as much as he should either. Listen, I'd be curious to ask him, but he's pretty normal. I want to start a
poll. I think I'm going to put an Instagram poll. I think your endocrinologist actually follows us on Instagram, Miriam. I'm going to make an Instagram poll. I want everyone to be truthful because I do not change my Lancet often at all. So while I am making fun of Miriam, I'm probably way worse than she is. So I'll be the first to admit that. Anyways, I'm getting off topic as usual. I think the biggest takeaway,
I guess is that included in back to basics? Like we should change our Lancets more. So that is a New Year's resolution we can get behind, but also like it's not a big deal if you don't. This isn't a life or death sort of thing.
If you use the same Lancet for like 50 years, it could probably be a big deal. But like as long as you know you've changed it in the last year. Yeah. Well, we're not giving medical advice. Let's just preface by saying that. I don't want to get sued.
I think more pressing changes you can make are like change your injection sites, change your pump sites. Like those have more immediate impact.
Check your blood sugar more or less.
Check your blood sugar more or less. But changing your Lancet,
It's like bottom tier in terms of importance in my list of things to do. But yeah, so to finish up this episode, Miriam and I did not discuss this prior. Sorry guys, my blood sugar's dropping and I keep having stuttering situations. But I'm okay, don't worry. I just had some glucose gummies.
Of your Lancet, actually.
Yes, while we spoke of Lancets, did I change it? No. Even though we were talking about it, I can't be tamed. Miriam, what are your top 3 basic things that you think someone who was recently diagnosed or just any diabetic type 1 or type 2 should consider in your back to basics category?
And this is on the fly, guys. Emily gave me no warning for this.
Well, I'm expecting you to throw it back at me. I can go first if you want.
No, I'm going to think. So I think what I said, number 1 back to basics is reflect on your data and patterns, however they're reported to you. And don't put pressure on yourself for that. Don't have to do it every day. That's not going to be particularly helpful, I don't think. But maybe even like at a minimum, maybe once a month or something, whether it's you looking through your data or someone else looking through your data, or even just like looking at a general pattern. And that is especially easier if you do have a CGM or some sort of like pump or something that kind of creates these graphs for you. But if not, looking at the data that you have about your blood sugars and see if there's any patterns. That's one back to basic. Another back to basic is patience with yourself, I think, in terms of the desire to rage bolus or to make major changes without looking at patterns. Again, I say this because I am very guilty of this. I know Emily is guilty of this too, the rage bolus. But I think remembering like, I gave insulin an hour ago. It is frustrating and annoying to see that, my blood sugar is still going up, but I need to give it time. I need to give it a little bit of time before I go crazy, because we've all sort of seen the opposite effect of rage bolusing where, where we 2 hours later and there we go. So looking at data, reflecting, patience is number 2. And number 3, and back to basics, is remembering to like communicate with a pal,
Oh, that was going to be one of mine.
You can use that too.
No,
but I think we're a good example of like something weird is happening and like just like mention it to someone who gets it or can kind of reflect with you.
Even if it's just to celebrate meeting your deductible.
Exactly. I texted Emily today. I was like, I get such satisfaction and a sense of accomplishment when I meet my deductible for insurance, like really quickly. Like luckily my deductible is not so high. So that is something I'm very grateful for. But when I meet it like within the first month or 2, I'm like, like I feel like on top of the world. And then I sort of reflect. I'm like, this is sort of sad and depressing too. But
we all go through it.
You have to talk, like being able to like talk about that with someone is really nice. So
it's why we created Pancreas Pals.
That's why we do this. That's why we talk to each other. That's why we talk to you guys. So yes, having a pal, that is a back to basics suggestion for me. All right, Emily, so your turn. What are your top 3 back to basics tips?
My top 3 back to basics hot tips, because I like to, be an asshole. Number 1, this is as basic as it gets. Change your sights.
Oh, yeah. Good one.
I've always been really good about rotating sights, but your girl is hitting, I think I'm 7.5 years into diabetes now, and I'm finally starting to see some scar tissue and some resistance build up. So just continue to stay on top of it. And this kind of leads into my number 2 thing, which is always keep an open mind when it comes to diabetes. That might seem like a weird basic thing, but like, you know, open mind is in trying new locations on your body for an insulin pump, you know, that's FDA approved and not like someplace weird and uncomfortable. I'm not suggesting that.
Although people do that. It seems to
have live your life, live your truth.
I've seen some crazy sites, but...
Yeah, that's not for me, but I just mean like, you know, keep an open mind, whether that's to trying something new, like you want to go scuba diving, but you're scared to set a temp basal that's a little bit higher, or if you don't have a pump, you're scared to run higher blood sugars for a small period amount of time in case you go low underwater, like whatever it is, keep an open mind. And number 3, have not in a religious way, but have faith in yourself. These are my top 3 basics because I do not do these things aside from rotate my sight. Just in summary, that's rotate your sight, keep an open mind, and have faith in yourself, because diabetes really does suck. And I know people are probably listening to this like, we didn't hop on Pancreas Palace to hear Emily complain, but like, yes, you did, first of all. Second of all, you know, you're lying. I'd be lying to myself if it didn't suck at times, if I didn't admit that. And I think that admitting that and having that pity party that Miriam always talks about every once in a while really does help me keep my head on. I was gonna say head on straight, but honestly just head on. And it helps me relate to others because I try to just keep all that in mind. So, you know, that's a really rapid summary of the things that we basically discussed this entire episode. But sometimes I think it's helpful to take a step back and think of yourself as a new diabetic, even if you've been diabetic for like 50 years or 5 months or whatever. You know, what is that advice that you'd give to a new diabetic? Maybe think about that once every 2 months, once every 3 months. Like think of 3 things that are back to basics for you and just see how you can apply those things to yourself now, because it's so easy to give advice to others, but so hard to take your own advice. And that's something that as I get older, and people ask me my take on things, I'm always like, oh yeah, I have the best dating advice. And this is like obviously before Matt, but like, LOL, what do I have to show for that? Like, or, you know, I have the best advice about diabetes, but then like, what's my time in range? Yeah. Like, what do I have to show for that? I think we are our own biggest advocates, but also our greatest enemies a lot of the time. And I think it's finding that homeostasis, that in between, that way to level things out that can make us survive and get through these times until hopefully there is a cure. And just know that we are so incredibly strong. Like, holy crap, we're strong to poke ourselves and prod ourselves every day, that it's okay to feel those ups and downs of your blood sugar, of your mental health. Just know that it's taking a step back and getting back to basics is a big help, for me at least. And yeah, I think that's it. Any last words, Miriam? Not last words. Sorry, guys. I'm actually low right now. So if you're like, what the hell is going on? It's me. But
I think that was a good way to end. And this is our last episode of 2021 and our last episode of the season, right? And so I think it's a nice way to sort of close up this year, close up this season, thinking into the future of sort of goals we want to set for ourselves. And our goals, as you've heard, are to get back to the basics.
Yes. And I do want to say this has been an incredible season. We've had lots of highs and lows right there along with you guys. Another year in the pandemic. Miriam moved to Texas. Just lots of things. Next season, we have a big surprise for you guys. But until then, and by surprise, I mean surprise we made it back. But I'm always surprised we're back for another season. But yeah, we're going to have lots of good guests and lots of fun times. So reach out to us. Hit us up on Instagram at pancreas_pals, on Facebook at pancreaspalspp. Hit us up on our DMs, slide into our email, pancreaspals123@gmail.com. We love hearing from you guys, whether it's a hot topic, it's someone being salty, it's tips for, new guests or new topics. Please let us know. We love hearing from you, and we want to create content that you guys want to listen to beyond me just rambling for 30 minutes and Miriam trying to talk me down, or successfully talking me down. But yeah, so much love, Miriam. I love you the most, and I can't wait to continue texting you all of my random diabetes things in the interim. Okay, have a great end of the year. Happy holidays. Get excited for the next season, which is going to be season 9, which is insane. And know that you can always look forward to us picking back up our mics and being there for you guys. So happy holidays, Miriam, and to all of our listeners.